Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. If this is your first time tuning in the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein, we are just days away from the opening of Chargers training camp. Football is nearly back. But man, oh man, did Dan Wolkenstein and I have a weekend. We took a road trip down to San Diego for the Rock Solid Sports memorabilia event, Tailgate the Bay. And there were a few surprise guests that decided to show up and mingle and do some meet and greets with the 400 to 500 fans that were in attendance. We're going to cover all of that because you guys are going to be seeing a lot of this footage come on the channel this week. But Dan Wolkenstein, before we get into everything, yesterday was a blast. I had fun. How about you?
It was a whirlwind. Yeah, that was so much fun. Shout out to all the Chargers fans, to everybody at the event. I was not expecting it to be that packed. I mean, there were so many tents. The Chargers fans, the lines to get to the meet and greets, all these players. It was wild. You mentioned the special guests. I had special guests that we didn't even know were going to be showing up. And legacy Chargers players were there. We heard some fun stories. It was just great food. Awesome discussions, and probably most importantly, so many backpacks for kids with that fundraiser event that we did. Again, everything that was purchased, 2 backpacks full of school supplies for each thing are given to school kids next year, or this coming school year, excuse me. So yeah, lots to discuss. Want to give key takeaways from the event, key takeaways from each of the player discussions, Cornelius Johnson, Alohi Gilman, as well as Rashawn Slater. So some really interesting comments by them that we'll get into, as well as a Popper article. Daniel Popper put out something and kind of got our ears perked in terms of Quentin Johnston possibly being wide receiver 4. So much to chat about here. But Jake, before we get to all of that, let's quickly pay the bills. Talk about our friends.
I want to remind everybody that BetOnline remains your number one source for all of your sports betting needs this season, from baseball, golf, soccer, right up to the top fights of the UFC and the MMA and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are currently being played. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino and get in on some of the game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our 150 slot games. Head on over to the website today. That's betonline.ag to get in on the action. Make sure to use the promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for your free 50% welcome bonus bet credit on your first deposit for up to $250. BetOnline, the game starts here.
So we said it. Paradise Point, Tailgate the Bay, huge fundraising event. San Diego showed up. Chargers fans, whether you were in San Diego or wherever you were and came down to San Diego, that was wild. So much fun. I can't remember that many jerseys being signed per person. That was wild. Those hands.
It was just like on a conveyor belt. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, it was so much fun though. Alohi, Cornelius, Rashawn, all of them were awesome. You see here on the screen here. I mean, they were signing everything. We saw a scooter being signed. We saw a baby being signed by all 3 of them. The event was so fun. Honestly, we had so much good food. We have a bunch of videos here we could kind of go through here. But Jake, what were kind of your main takeaways from the event before we get to the discussions we had with the 3 of them? Because there was some big stuff there. What's your main takeaways from the event?
It's just the atmosphere. And you know what? We kind of talked about this when the Chargers held that practice back down in San Diego for a lot of the vets that were in attendance for there. When we got a chance to talk to Alohi Gilman specifically, because you brought this up, Dan, in one of your questions to him, they fully understand just the legacy of the team. And I think that it's so cool to kind of go back to the roots, even all these years after the Chargers being gone from San Diego. The fans are still there. The fans are still loyal. And there was just, the atmosphere was so cool to see everybody show up. All these different types of contingents of Chargers fans that were there, some weren't even living in San Diego, that even came down for the event, and people just mingling, talking about how they became fans, how long they've been fans, how long they've been pulling for this team. And you felt the Chargers love everywhere that you turned. So it was a great event. Tailgate the Bay. It literally was the closest thing that you could get to a tailgate on Sundays, just put a body of water right behind you. And that's pretty much what this event was. But it was lively, it was electric, and everybody showed up, and it was a great time.
Yeah, you mentioned everybody showing up. I mean, we had obviously Alohi Gilman, Cornelius Johnson, Rashawn Slater, David Bin shows up, long snapper for the Chargers. Chris Gilman shows up for the Chargers.
Out of nowhere, by the way, out of nowhere.
And they were just mingling with the fans. It was just a block party down there. I mean, we saw so much. It was awesome. That was so cool. That was the closest thing you can get to Thunder Alley before Thunder Alley kicks off here in August, September for tailgating. It was just cool to see, man. And, you saw stuff with Camp Pendleton, weeks ago for the Chargers going down to San Diego and kind of the being welcomed there. And Cornelius Johnson, he brought it up. And he was a San Diego Charger fan for a long time. And it was kind of cool. I think I got goosebumps. I'm getting goosebumps now talking about it. Seeing his reaction, being in San Diego, talking about being by the water and just down back to the roots and how much this team is being welcomed. It was just a really, really cool event. Shout out to Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia, to the entire team and staff that kind of was getting all the stuff set up. It's a well-oiled machine. There'll be more of these coming up, but this Chargers team has a lot of exciting things coming. And I think this Chargers fan base understands what's at hand. By the way, Jake, we didn't get a chance to because the guy who was barbecuing all of this food, that food went so quick.
Yes.
And talk about rave reviews. He's going to be there at Thunder Alley as well during the season. We got a chance to talk to him for a bit. So looking forward to actually getting a chance to try it. So much fun. But I think for Chargers fans who are listening, who weren't able to attend, each of these players are just great individuals, honestly. And we got a chance to kind of sit down with each of them to kind of get their take. And we talked to each of them for 5-10 minutes or so. And one thing that was, for me, I think, telling, the theme that went through all three of these players throughout these discussions, and they talked about it literally, was this idea of this team being hungry and the impact, the bad taste in their mouth from last season and learning through adversity. And Alohi Gilman specifically talking about the hunger and, what you say to pundits. Because we asked him about, what do you say to the naysayers? People who say you didn't have enough, people who say that this team isn't good enough. What do you say to them? And he said, there's something to be said about a team that's hungry, and it's hard to stop that kind of team. And he said this whole experience brought the team closer. But hunger, I think, is something that is pretty darn clear. And I don't know about you, Jake, but it feels like there's a silent confidence to this team right now, at least to the players we've talked to or seen talk.
It's amazing when you can get someone different in there that channels that in you. And not to say that they didn't have confidence in themselves or this team previously,
sure.
But it goes back to that old adage. You keep going to the same well, thinking that you're going to get something different, and it doesn't happen. So what do? You come in with a complete culture overhaul to this team, and it has affected it at every level. It's affected it at coaching. It's now affecting it to the players. And I talked to Rashawn Slater about this, and even for the short period of time that he has been on this team, he's now one of the longest tenured offensive linemen for this team. Him and Trey Pipkins are basically the two guys who have been on this offensive line the longest. And I talked to him about, how did it feel knowing that there is a coaching staff in place now and a front office in place now that is truly just investing highly in the offensive line and their mantra? And he loved it because he thinks that that's obviously where everything starts. That is what's going to create the pace of a team, what's going to create the pace of how you're going to go up against defenses. And he was really happy about that. On top of that, we got into a little bit more detail about the coaching, talking about Mike Devlin and Nick Hardwick. Him talking about Devlin being more of the old school type, but Hardwick even coming into this as seemingly a rookie as a coach. He's the one that's bringing the energy, but he feels that everybody has bought into it, obviously with Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh at the helm. You just make these little type of culture changes, and the after effect can be huge.
Yeah, and the Rashawn Slater discussion that you had, we'll kind of get to these individually. So we'll do Rashawn Slater first. So Rashawn Slater kind of talked about like the new coaching staff. I think what he was excited about was this idea of, being able to unapologetically establish like a team identity, right? And you talked about the prioritizing of the trenches and establishing a run game with Greg Roman. And the other thing that he talked about was this idea of like the attention to detail and, running a tight ship, right? This team with its new staff, like they mean business. And you and I kind of talked about it before, Jake, last week. Training camps were fun. And obviously this team had a lot of work and was working hard years past, but it feels like there's a lot less of the superfluous stuff. The tertiary things have kind of been trimmed out of this, and it's all business, at least during the times that they're clocking in. And so the team seems to have bought in a lot already. And there's a lot of admiration for where this team is going and why they're going there. And it's because of the man at the helm, Jim Harbaugh. Alohi Gilman, we sat down with, technically stood next to for a bit. Alohi Gilman's such a great dude, man. He is so kind. He is as good of a person off the field as he is on the field, maybe even better, if we're being honest. But he talked about this new energy that this team has had under Jim Harbaugh. But the part that I think is that I took almost the most out of was the idea of maximizing potential. And the goal of this entire season is to maximizing each player's potential and playing together for longer periods of time. I want to double click on this because we saw how many times in years past where in spurts, and Alohi talked about this, in spurts, this team played together and played together really well at spurts, but it wasn't long enough. It wasn't for the amount of time that was required to win football games. And how many times towards end of games, especially on defense, if we're being honest, they couldn't put that togetherness for 60 minutes. Or even, hell, for one drive at times, for a quarter. And how many end of game scenarios ended with losses because of the inability to play together on a string. Working together for longer periods of time is a priority for this defense. And I thought that was really interesting because it kind of has this introspective look of like, look, guys, we got to fix this. What do you think?
At a surface level, it doesn't sound like the most crazy concept, does it? It sounds like they know what their problems were, where they've suffered over the last couple of years as it relates to the secondary. But instead of just going to the individual to say, hey, this is how we're going to come in and these are the things that we want to focus on for you to develop better. And then we'll go ahead and we'll make this fit better in the scheme based on your improvements or things that we need to correct. Let's correct it as a team.
I'm fascinated.
You want to believe that previous regimes did that. I think from everything that we have heard since the previous regime is now gone, and you've heard comments from Derwin James, Khalil Mack, and Joey Bosa as far as how the culture was conducted and things that took place, it didn't seem like there were those attention to detail that we hear so much about today.
Nobody talked about it anyways, that's for sure.
So it gives you just an early idea. Again, we're talking about not even seeing this defense play a snap of NFL football together with Jesse Minter as the defensive coordinator. And I don't know if I could recall anything as it relates to this Chargers team that talks that differently or that polar opposite from what the previous regime is. Most coaches and teams, you'll go through the usual rhetoric to say, yeah, we're going to work to improve. We're going to do X, Y, Z to make sure that we're better on offense or defense. This is getting down to the bare bones of it. And this actually shows a plan and a commitment from head coach, coordinators to say, here's the problem. Instead of just saying what the problem is, let's figure out a different way to address it. And we're going to get better results.
Yeah. And I'm fascinated. I'm hoping that we can get a chance to ask like the how. Like, how do you get this team? Tactically, what is this staff and roster doing to work on playing better and longer together, because that's where the hard work is. You can say we got to play better together. Like, what do you do that can ensure that? And you mentioned Jesse Minter. Alohi Gilman talked about Jesse Minter, and that's what he brings. That's what he's excited for, is the emphasis on maximizing individual players' potential. And he said, when everybody plays together well, you see people's stats and people's performances improve because of the connectivity. So Alohi is excited. And he talked about the safety group, talked about excitement to work with Tony Jefferson. And we talked about him and Derwin being arguably the best tandem in the NFL for the safety groups. And, I think Alohi's just excited to get back to work and to work with this team and to be with his guys and go through that adversity and come out the other side stronger. And that's the mentality that I think you hope that everyone on this Chargers team takes, is learn from it. It didn't not happen, but how can you grow from it? And so Alohi was great. Rashawn Slater, we talked about. Anything else from Rashawn Slater before we get to Cornelius?
He got into obviously how Joe Alt is doing on the early days between OTAs and minicamp, and he thinks that he's coming along very well. Just again, talking about his size, like you see me standing next to Rashawn Slater, it just makes me look like that big. But then just him talking about someone who's bigger than he is, who stands 6'8", is just ridiculous.
I think he said technically, Jake, that he is the tallest person in the NFL.
Because how tall is Parham?
I think they're both 6'8".
Are they? Now that's wild to me, because Donald Parham is a slim 6'8".
Yeah, it's like Slim Reaper,
right?
Grant versus like Shaq. Like they're different. They're the same height, but they're very different people.
Yes, so that's still just wild to me. But we transition from that to, how is Trey Pipkins going to benefit from kicking inside to guard, because he's got more of that athletic profile? We all knew that he was going to be a developmental project when Tom Telesco took him in the third round a number of years ago. But how is it going to benefit him? And Rashawn thinks it's going to benefit him tremendously, kicking inside. So he's excited for him. He's excited to have Bradley Bozeman at the center position. He thinks Zion's going to turn out very well overall, much like Alohi Dan. He's excited about what this offensive line is going to bring to the helm. But again, I think it all stems from the changes in the philosophy of this new head coaching staff.
It does. It does. But by the way, can you imagine a basketball team in the NFL, but with Joe Alt and Donald Parham
Essentially
Jr.?
5 Joe Alts.
No, Donald Parham Jr., Joe Alt, like that. That's a 1-2 tandem. Pretty good. Good luck. That's like the David Robinson, Tim Duncan thing. Catches 2 trees, aren't going to get by him.
Yes.
I'm aging myself. Anyways.
No, hey, that was, even though that may seem years ago, like imagine if you had more time with that tandem on the Spurs. Just in the bigger picture of things. But I know that's a side conversation. Rashawn Slater also talked about, because when I brought up Greg Roman and the philosophy of running the ball for this team, he got really excited about just the word physical, getting them back to pushing people around. We already know what Rashawn Slater is all about. We have seen his resume for the last few years. We know how good he is. But when it comes to taking that type of a mindset with the game and saying that we're going to pound it down your throat and there's nothing that you can do about it, he really likes having that type of a vision and that type of a priority with this team.
Yeah, I think Rashawn Slater's excited. I talked about the establishing an identity unapologetically. I think that's what this team has been desperate for, is doing so. Cornelius Johnson it was fun hanging with him for a bit. And, he has kind of that, I mentioned that quiet confidence. He kind of has that quiet confidence. And, whether it's because of his relationship with Jim Harbaugh and company, whether it's just his maturity as a human, he has stuff that I think he brings to this team, not just on the field, that I can see why Jim Harbaugh drafted him, just as from like a human perspective. I think the part that was interesting is we talked to him about this, like specifically the idea of like, what is that? What's it like being in this wide receiver room where there's so many things kind of up in the air and roster spots up for grabs? Like, is it like the elephant in the room? And he said, no. He said, it's definitely spoken. It's not the unspoken stuff. The folks know, and it's kind of about how you manage that mentally and push forward. And he understands. I thought this was probably my favorite kind of quote from any of the three players. He talked about being a late round pick, acknowledging that your fate is determined by just a few key moments and having to make those count and more. He understands, and that's the case with so many of these guys on the bubble at this point, is they're not going to have that much of an opportunity to make a name for themselves. And so when they do, they got to step up.
Have to.
And that's got to be a lot, man. Like, just think about that. When you know how much is at stake and you got 4 plays maybe coming your way, and what can you do with those? But he understands it. And it's not just him.
But the mentality is correct. You talk about the most crowded positional group of this entire team for wide receiver, which again is still just nuts to say considering where we were just a couple months ago. But especially for him, Dan, who most people see his immediate contribution being on special teams. So there's going to be a big relationship, obviously, that he's going to have to develop with Ryan Ficken here over these next few weeks. And as you mentioned, when it comes to some of those preseason games, when you're late in the game, it's probably not just going to be special teams that you're being utilized on. You're going to get those handful of calls where you're in the offense and those passes are coming to you. And what's going to happen when they're there? What do you make of it? So I thought that was a great mindset of him. And again, to do it in the most crowded positional group of this team has at wide receiver right now. Are they going to keep 5? Are they going to keep 6? We still have no idea. I would think that they would be better off if they kept 6, and he's definitely in a battle for that right now. So be interesting.
Yeah. He also talked about the experience being in Michigan, and everybody's talking about the offense and maybe what it's going to be like. If it's going to be similar to what they ran at Michigan. And he said, look, this is going to be way more than Michigan. And he's excited for Chargers fans and for opponents to be able to kind of see that. And so if you're just expecting this to be like a run heavy, only vanilla, or just Michigan style offense, it sounds like there's a lot more coming. And again, you and I have talked about the brain trust and how important that is. And when you get that many people all gearing towards success, a lot of times groupthink can eliminate some bad ideas. And if a bad idea goes through that many people, like that's an issue. So I have a hard time believing there's going to be some really, really stupid stuff that doesn't get, vetted by some staff members and be like, should we double click on that, make sure that we are doing that correctly? So that had me excited, just to be candid. Like, what is this offense going to look like? We don't know. Everyone
gave you a little bit of
guesses.
A peek behind the curtain. And it was nice from that standpoint to say, like, it reminded me of when we had Sean Merriman on the show. And when he basically said, it's like, if you think that Jim Harbaugh with Justin Herbert as his quarterback is literally just going to run the ball every single time, defenses are going to be in for a nice surprise.
Yeah. So transitioning. So a bunch of stuff at the event, and we want to kind of give some overall takeaways from our interviews with them. And again, thank all 3 of them for giving us some time. I know they had a busy day. They were driving up and down the coast. I think they were I don't know this, but I can tell you that there were some surprise faces and holy expletives when people looked up from signing and seeing the amount of fans or the line that was around them for meet and greets. And you and I could talk about it. Like, it felt like it was never going to end.
Cornelius, because they put that stack of jerseys in front of Cornelius, and he put his head down and he was signing, jerseys just going off like to the left. And he maybe kept his head down for 4 straight minutes, and he was just, trying to just fire off as many as he could. And the next thing he knows, there is the group of fans right in front of him that are all lined up for the next part of the signing event. It was just a surprise to him. It just came out of nowhere.
Yeah, it was awesome, and it was cool. Like, the fans were felt by the players. So again, you can see all three of those discussions. We'll have them on the channel this week, so look forward to those. But again, thank you to the players. Thank you to Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia for putting on the event. Swoop and Tailgate. There's so many guys and gals who were a part of that machine that made it awesome. So if you weren't there, there will be some more coming up here, I believe. More details to follow when I find out more information. But Jake, last one. We're out of here. Training camp's just Wednesday. I mean, we're so close. And speaking of Cornelius Johnson, this wide receiver room, I feel like has so much fluctuation and so many things that are labeled TBD. Quentin Johnston's role is also, I think, TBD.
Yeah, this obviously came out from one of Popper's most recent articles when he was talking about the biggest storylines heading into camp. And the biggest takeaway was that his projection, now, of course, he is not saying that this is going to be the projected starting three come week one, because a lot of things could obviously change between now and training camp. But his projection as it stands, when we get training camp rolling here in just a couple days, is that he expects the 3 wide receiver set in 11 personnel to be Josh Palmer, Ladd McConkey, and DJ Chark. Joshua Palmer obviously being the most versatile and connected veteran of this group thus far, can play inside, outside. We've known what Josh Palmer's been about when he steps on the field. Ladd McConkey's rapport with Justin Herbert is just growing at an exponential level, and he's going to man the slot. And DJ Chark specifically is going to be your X receiver for some of those downfield passes. Now, for Quentin Johnston, this is interesting because for him, I look at this, some people are calling this a demotion and that it's a bad look, just in an outside perspective. And here's where I'm going to push back on that a little bit. Look, let's just say it. We've said it already a number of different times. Quentin Johnston's even said it himself. Quentin Johnston had a bad rookie year. No reason to sugarcoat that. But you take now what you've heard from Sanjay Lal, Quentin Johnston himself taking accountability for some of the issues that took place last year. As Jim Harbaugh and as Jesse Minter and a lot of other coaches on this team have talked about, they want to put their guys in the best position to win that accentuates what their best traits are. And I echo back to when we had Trevor McHugh on the show last week. He said that Jim Harbaugh loves to coach guys who have come in and beat him, because then he can say, I want to use your best skill set for me now. And we can go out and beat somebody. And look, go back 2 years when it was TCU and Michigan in the college playoffs. Quentin Johnston had himself a game. I guarantee you, even if it means that this is taking a little bit more of a developmental phase, or Quentin Johnston's retooling himself more, they probably watched film of last year, and they're probably never going to watch it again. To just say let's put it in the trash. That was the rookie year. We're not going to say, and pinpoint to say, okay, well, we need to develop this. No, I think that their whole plan is to basically recreate him from scratch and rebuild him in the image of what they want to do for this offense. So I think that's why this wide receiver 4 label is out there right now, because he is technically a wild card. But I guarantee you, by the time that we hit the regular season, Jim Harbaugh, Sanjay Lal, they're going to know exactly what's going to benefit Quentin Johnston the most, and they're going to put him in the best position to succeed.
It's funny because a lot of people see the wide receiver 4 and see it as like a dig, or see it as like this is the last we're going to see of Quentin Johnston, like he's on his decline. The thing that I've noticed about this team and the staff and the way that they operate is there's a lot less of operating in the world of hopes and dreams and potential, and more of operating in the realities of situations.
Just do the work.
Yeah, like do the work, one, but if you guys can turn out to be great, great. But we're going to have contingency plans, and we're going to go out and sign guys so that way we're going to ensure this team is going to be built to withstand whatever happens with you. So instead of, for example, this team not signing DJ Chark, not signing 2 receivers or 3 receivers, the draft. Imagine if they came out and said, Quentin Johnston's going to be our new wide receiver 1. We have all the trust in him in the world. He is, all the accolades, right? All the praise, all the hopes and dreams, admirations of what this guy can be, but they don't go out and get anybody. That's hopes and dreams, and that's what you're banking on. That's not what they did. We have to think that as much as we think that, that's probably not the start that Quentin Johnston wants, and man, he's wide receiver 4, but that's also the reality right now. And I think Quentin Johnston would tell you that. And so if you ask Quentin Johnston right now, based on last year's performance and based on the guys we have, where would you stack rank yourself? Not based on what you think you are, or based on what you can do, but what you've done and what we've seen from you and everybody else, where would you put yourself? Say the same thing. Now, go out, ball out, prove yourself, climb the ranks. But you're seeing it with a Bud Dupree signing. You're seeing it with Gus Edwards, and you're seeing J.K. Dobbins, and you're seeing Kamani Vidal. You're seeing this team build contingency plans and living in the reality. And so when I saw that, I was like, yeah, that's where else would he be? He's not going to be 5. He's not going to be 3. You're not going to put him ahead of these guys right now. So yeah, maybe this adds fuel to the fire. I don't know. But again, to your point, just got to put the work in.
Exactly.
We're living in realities right now, and this team is doing it, and they're operating as such. So the wide receiver room, Jake, is going to be so fun to watch. And, we had Cornelius for a bit. I think you and I have talked about it. I think there's 5 receivers. I think they're going to keep 6. And that wide receiver 6 battle is up for grabs. I don't see 7. So no. Feels like it's between Cornelius and between Brendan Rice. But Quentin Johnston is going to have an opportunity to prove himself.
Time will tell, Dan. We're days away from training camp opening.
We are so close. And Jake and I will be there this coming week for training camp. So be on the lookout for us. We got a lot of fun things in store. There's a bunch of events happening over the weekend. So Chargers fans are so pumped to finally get training camp back at the Bolt. Anything else, Jake, you want to get over before we are out of here today?
Finally coming out of the drolldums of the year, Dan. Are you kidding me? We're actually going to have content as it relates to training camp this week, news from training camp this week, which means that preseason isn't that far away now.
Feels good.
Oh,
we made it. We did
football. I have missed you.
We did it. So we got lots of things coming up. You're going to see a ton of things being pumped out by us here in the next couple of days, but honestly, probably between now and the start of the season. So this is where it gets real. Again, Chargers fans who came to the event, y'all are the best. So many people come up, talk to us, and a lot of people are way too kind. But we appreciate all of you for tuning in to, again, Rashawn Slater, Cornelius Johnson, Alohi Gilman, Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia, everybody who's out there at the tailgate event, all of our fans, listeners who continue to leave reviews, to say hi, to all the comments from live shows. Y'all are the best. And next stop is all things Chargers training camp at the Bolt. We'll be with you covering it every step of the way. It's been fun, Jake. We made it through it. We finally get training camp. For Jake Hefner, I'm Dan Wolkenstein, Chargers Unleashed, LA Football Network. We'll talk to you next time on Chargers Unleashed.